Now it's working.
Yeah.
And let me just say the introduction and then we'll go right to you, Don. So,
Sure, that sounds good.
welcome to Values Plus AA equals Impact. And it is June 11th, 2025. It is 7 p.m. CET. And we're really happy that you're joining us. Also, if you're watching the recording today, um, just a special note for this particular month and next month. We've talked in the past about the fact that I'll be attending the AI for Good Summit in Geneva, Switzerland. And it happens to be exactly on the second Wednesday of the month in July, on July 9th. So Charles and I have talked about that, and knowing how tricky it can be to use the equipment when you're in another place and don't know how well the connections would work, we've decided it probably makes more sense, A, that I concentrate on the conference, and B, then when I get back the following week, which will be the July 16th, that we will do our sessions the third week in July and not the second week. And we look forward to A, seeing you hopefully a week later, but B, then I'll be able to share with you all the wonderful things I spent 4 days learning when I was in Geneva and having a chance to find out all the newest things that are happening in AI. So that's just something to help you get organized for next month. And we look forward to seeing you then on July 16th. The times, the links, everything else stays the same. It's just 1 week later. Charles has updated that in Eventbrite, so everything is ready to go. So thank you so much. And Donna, you were going to mention something that was going to help us all. So go right ahead.
I just read this in Inc. magazine yesterday, and it's called Agenic AI, Agentic AI. And it says it has the power to change how we identify talent in the workplace. And I think it's going to be, from what I read, a hiring tool, and well as a potential promoting tool of people and their performance. But it's going to only be as good as the data put into it. So humans have to input the data for it to ultimately do whatever it's going to do. But it kind of, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it was sort of interesting because all of a sudden, even though it's going to be unbiased, the data, I don't know how clean or unbiased the data is going to be that gets put into it, but it's going to have something to do with how people advance their careers. Um, I don't know.
Well, let me just fill in a little bit before we get something as fascinating as career development, which is a
Yeah.
much bigger thing. Let me tell you a little bit about agentic AI on a basic level.
Okay,
So
sure.
there's a wonderful video with Sam Altman from OpenAI with 3 or 4 of his folks, and they're sitting down and explaining how an AI agent works. And in the video they show that they have a piece of paper, a real physical piece of paper with a shopping list. And it has 7 articles on it. And they scan this into the computer and they start the AI agent and say to the agent, this is my shopping list. I need to have these things in my house this evening by 6 p.m. The agent does everything else by itself without any interaction from the people at the table. So the agent, first of all, turns the handwriting into text that it understands. It goes in and shops at various online shops to see which of the shops have these things, checks on the prices, checks on the delivery times, makes the payment with the credit card, and the stuff comes to the guy's door by 6 o'clock in the evening. That all happens with no human interaction. That is an AI agent in a really basic level, just to give you an idea. So I assume this new AI agent would be doing something about looking through all the different, resumes or CVs that people are sending in and trying to choose, which of those fits the best and reporting back to whoever the HR person is or something to that effect. And that would all happen without a person having to interact. during the process. So that's the way agents are basically set up.
Oh,
Does
wow,
that
that's
help?
really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because in the article it says it's going to recognize the richest and most underused sources of the data, meaning attached to any individuals.
It's just like the shopping list. So if
Yeah,
you're going and you're comparing 4 different online supermarkets and trying to figure out with all of the different parameters, which things, delivery times, prices, all of those things, it goes through all of that and makes the best decision. So that's very similar to what you're talking about, I think.
it's funny. We talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about positive intelligence. Now they're calling this human intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
trademarked. You know that.
Not what I call human
Interesting.
intelligence. What we're doing is what I call human
Yeah, me too. So, but that
intelligence.
apparently it's a company called Work Human.
Okay.
Maybe they're the ones that are. The article wasn't very long,
Mm-hmm.
but I just thought it was sort of interesting that, from my vantage point, always trying to assess an individual's who should do what
Mm-hmm.
because they do it the best, and usually that's something that we just figure out from a human standpoint, but not always easily.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
What do you think, Charles?
Yeah, just looking up, I had read about as much as I think Donna on agentic, although I didn't remember the term. But I've read about tools that can do all those wonderful things for you without intervention by you after you've given it, presumably at some point, your personal details such as
Mm-hmm.
your credit card. But I mean, we do that to websites anyway, so that's not such a big deal, I guess. As long as you can trust the particular tool. So I'm just looking up this particular one, which is to do with HR by the sound of it, isn't it? Work Human is an AI-assisted HR agent by the look of it. Just looking at its website, and it helps you do all sorts of things that HR has to do with in terms of recruitment, leadership, and organizations. So that's all I know about Work Human. I mean, it just there are clearly lots of tasks that we do and lots of jobs that we do which are going to be taken over, aren't they? And this is just a second wave of AI coming at us, I guess, isn't it? After all those wonderful Chat GTP and all the rest of them, Perplexity, Claude, and so on. We've got a new wave which is going to do even more for us, and so presumably it will take over lots of fairly basic clerical work, but presumably over time, the complexity of the work that it undertakes will be greater. Whether you want to shop out to an AI tool recruitment of your personnel, I don't really know, but you might want to, get them to screen. I mean, already recruitment consultants recruitment agencies do that, don't they? By some sort of AI. Making a job application these days is, the first few rounds are without any human intervention. A friend of mine is just applying for a big organization, and he's 3 months in, just had an interview with a robot, video interview with a robot, and had the assessment that's processed, I think by the look of it, by another robot, and he's been invited to meet a human being, maybe a panel of human beings for the first time. But that's 3 or 4 months into the whole process, which is amazing. So this is, I guess, this is all part of that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. 2 important things. If one of you can put a link to, because I'm not looking up at the moment, I'm paying attention here to what everybody's saying and taking notes. If you could put the link in the chat, that would be great, because we'd include that then for everybody who watches the recording. And we have to say hi because Noma is joining us from South Africa. How are you today, ma'am?
Good evening.
Uh,
For some reason, my camera, my video won't turn on, but I hope you can hear me.
we hear you extremely well. Sorry we can't see you this time, but we know who you are, and we're happy that you could join us. And we're talking about AI agents and the things they could do, like in this recruitment process, as you heard part of it, and other things that are going on with what an agent does and how human, quote unquote, an agent then could be, and what it's doing and what it's taking up. Do you have any experience with AI agents so far, or any questions?
So far, no, but it's just it's amazing that increasingly, our interactions will be with AI, and AI will be a gatekeeper in a sense. And are we thinking that, because there'll be AI, things will be easier? I think it just means one has to up their game, because it's go maybe finding a job. It's not a matter of, oh, my aunt is working, or I know this person at company X, but it's actually going to be a very impartial process. So people need to know what they're doing, be up, constantly be up to date. So it's not doesn't mean that we'll be slacking anytime soon. It just means that you need to be, yeah, yeah.
Good.
Noma, you made me think it's going to be hard, and inevitably there's somebody that doesn't pull their own weight in the workplace, maybe even more than one. And if this agent AI is made so readily available as time moves forward, it's going to be harder to, more likely they might get let go because they're not pulling their own weight. And it might shorten that window of time that companies start to decide who they're going to let go and when. Because if you are a chronic poor performer, because the data they feed into the AI keeps on pointing you as being the
Yeah.
weakest link, that's going to put humans under pressure. And you made an interesting situation, especially when you can't count on, somebody or you're related to somebody in the company. It is going to wind up being the best person's going to win the job and the best person's going to keep the job. And the question is, what do you do with the people that are chronic poor performers? Begs the question, doesn't it?
I'll just have to pick up their weight, I suppose. Yeah, but it's a very interesting what is this time? Yeah, and the interventions that it's bringing with it. Yeah, I think, when you listen to the conversations around AI and you listen to young people, the impression that they have is that, oh, I don't have to go to school. I don't have to, put effort into things because AI will be there. And just hearing the end bit of the conversation, it just means that they have to work even harder.
Yeah, that's another great point. That is another great point. They have to understand early on that, and there's some cultures out there right now, and I won't name them, that as they're raising children, they kind of drive them to be performers in school, in music, in athletics. They really drive them to achieve. But not all kids on the planet have that same kind of parental force behind them. And they can get lulled into saying, and we might have done it ourselves when we were in school. Like, how many times are people going to ask us this algebraic formula on the streets when when we're 30, type of thing. So why do I have to learn it now? You made something interesting. They're going to have to understand from an earlier age that they have to keep up.
I think it's very interesting, isn't it, Donna? I just think that actually this reflects the conversation Rhonda and I were having earlier, just before we started the call. It seems to be that AI is driving exactly that process that you and Noma were talking about, where children rely on, digital means to acquire knowledge when they need it. Therefore, they don't have to learn too many facts. And so we're constantly surprised when young people who grew up with the internet actually, don't seem to know don't seem to have basic knowledge of basic skills. But it's to do with that, isn't it? And I think the educational sector is still very much in the mindset of trying to teach knowledge, teach facts and how to analyze the facts and so on, which is the way that we were educated, I guess. I think fighting a losing battle. I mean, I'm certainly been keen in trying, when I've been, in the charity I chair, trying to get schools to teach skills rather than knowledge, much more, because that suits the modern world. This has been our mantra for the last 20 years or so. But it may be, we feel that we're sort of pushing against a very strong tide. Teachers don't want to do it. If they do that, they just feel the system doesn't allow them to do that. But I think it's just happening anyway. And that's a big, big change, I think, in the way that the world operates, the way that education works.
Mm-hmm.
Profound change.
I'm going to somebody in the family is graduated from high school, and I was looking, and in the newspaper, it's the graduation season, and I see some local high schools, and it says the size of the class. It also says percentages that are going to college and percentages that are, quote unquote, going into the workforce. And there's clearly certain schools have a lot more going into the workforce at age 18 than going to college. So it begs the question, like, what can they do if they haven't been taught something more concrete, other than, when as getting into the workforce is not an easy place these days.
Well, maybe they learn more in the workforce than they do at college, at university. I mean, I think there must be a question mark over a lot of the courses at many tertiary education institutions, really.
Well, in other words, it makes somebody's job easier having this agent AI, right? It seems like it's a more unbiased way of evaluating people and streamlining the decision for the business so we can become more profitable. But then it has a huge human impact, potential consequence. And we've always heard of late bloomers, right? They weren't that well engaged in school or even in college. And you hear about this is not everybody, but they buy an island because they had this brilliant idea and created this company, and they retired at 40, but you never would have guessed that. So I wonder if AI will be able to identify what a latent strength is that's not being used. I don't know.
That could be the case. I just wanted to mention that many, many years ago, while my husband was still working at a bank, they started a system where they had machine learning. It wasn't an agent, there wasn't AI in that case, but it was going through all of the applications for people to get loans from the bank. And there were times when the system decided who got the loans, and there were times when people interviewed these people in person and decided who got the loans, and the machine did better. Okay. So when the machine said these people should get the loans, and they looked at the repayment and whether things were on time or there were difficulties and all those things, the machine did better than the people, because the people were often, either they felt sorry for someone, or someone gave them some, big sob story, or somebody didn't like the way somebody looked, but they would have paid it all back. All those. The machine had none of that. The machine just had the facts, and the machine's quota for repayment was better than what the people had.
Even before AI. So
now, long before AI. Long before AI.
Now it would presumably be better still.
Exactly. So we're thinking that all of this is somehow, well, it all is all new. And I mean, the way it's happening and what's happening is new, but the idea itself is it the machine that does a better job of evaluating something, or is it a person? And for some things, it's a person, and maybe for some other things, it's the machine. And I'm not saying that I don't want people to be doing things anymore, but maybe this screening or sorting out first things is maybe not a bad idea, because I know when I used to work at a company many years ago in Germany, and one day I walked into the boss's office and there were these huge boxes on the floor. And I said, "What is going on?" "Oh, we had an ad in the newspaper. 700 people have applied for this position." This was a very long time ago. It's a very big company in Germany. I said, "You have on paper, 7 boxes of all this paper." And people, I said, "You have 700 people who want this one job?" "Yeah." I said, "How in the world are you going to decide?" And which doesn't work in the US, but does work in Germany. They were looking at pictures first, people's faces. And that's what I'm saying, is that represent, is that what they look like? We're talking about upskilling and all of those things, what's actually happening, or this idea that you hire people now for their values and for what they can bring and not what they know, because you can teach them what they know, but you can't teach them how to be a different person.
Right.
That's another part that comes into this conversation, I think, as well. I don't know, Noma, what are you seeing with the nice people you're working with in your country? Are there this distinction between what people know and how they do things?
I think what you've just alluded to, selection based on how a person looks, that's a natural, people tend to gravitate to good looks naturally. A person can be devious, but if they look good, the first perception you think is that's a great person. So I'm just wondering if AI will, just like, is it Donna who was saying, will it, okay, she was talking about latent skills, but will it be able to pick up on personality? Is it something that it's going to be able to do, like accurately?
I can give you
I
the
think
answer.
sometimes,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, because I think sometimes, you've got your psychometric tests that are done for some interviews and questions, and that can be an objective evaluator. But then meeting the person, um, I think as humans, we've got a sixth sense where you can sense that, although this person has scored very high on these evaluation tests, but my intuition doesn't feel comfortable with this person. You don't have a reason why you feel like that, and you go with your gut feeling, and it could prove to be right later. Is you know where do you draw the line? But I suppose, as a Charles said, the AI kind of sieves the first 3 rounds, and then later, um, maybe the third or fourth round, they get to have a live interview with a person. So maybe that would be a process where there's a complementing um, of skills, AI skills helping to select, and that human aspect coming in. So it's not totally driven by artificial intelligence in terms of who gets selected, but there is a human component. So that strikes a balance somehow. I'm
Well,
thinking.
I'd like to share what happened to me this past week. I'm in a program at the moment where the gentleman who's running the program gave us this very long prompt and said, if you're trying to set up this new thing and you've never done this before, this is the prompt I use to set up new things. Okay, new programs. And I said, fine. And I put this into ChatGTP, and it said, you need to speak to ChatGTP, not write, you need to speak. And I said, okay. And so I was sitting there and it was asking me all these questions about what do you do and who do you like to work with? And tell me about a person you worked with and what happened and all these things. So I sat down and I did all of the nice, and I spoke into ChatGPT and gave it all the nice answers. And when it finished, and it was always giving things back to me, and I said, I can't believe what this machine is telling me. And I could have just been very flattered and say, oh, isn't it nice that it's telling me that? I mean, that could have been my approach. But the fortunate thing was 2 days later, I was actually coaching the client that I spoke about as the answer to my questions. So I took everything out of that. There was a very long thing. It took me 2 hours to do this prompt. But I took out the section that was about what she and I do together and how ChatGTP expressed that back to me and then to us. This lady's name was Laura. And I just shared my screen and I said, look, Laura, this is what I talked about you and how you and I work together. And this is what ChatGTP says about how we work together. I'd like you to read that. And I'd like you to tell me if that's the way you experience our coaching. And she said, Rhonda, that's exactly the way I feel. And she had no input into it whatsoever. I had said everything. And I thought, well, it makes me feel good, that's one thing, but it's two of us, involved in this relationship. And strangely enough, she kept reading, through things. And she said, Rhonda, I don't know how this machine figured this out because it knows a lot about me. Obviously, I've been working with this for quite some time, but it doesn't know anything about Laura. It doesn't even know Laura's last name. Just what I said about how Laura and I work together. And it was amazing. And it came up with word combinations that I would never think of. And Laura said the same thing. Like, what I provide is wise companionship. Two wonderful words that we all know in English, and both, for me, both very positive words, but I would have never thought about talking about wise companionship. But it did. And Laura looked at me and said, Rhonda, I would have never said that, but that's exactly what it is.
I have to interrupt you for a minute, Rhonda.
Yeah.
As whenever we're self-employed in any way, shape, or form, whether we're actually running a large company or just a solopreneur, it begs the question, how are you perceived and what are your strengths and how do you brand yourself and blah, blah, blah. Everyone I've ever worked with in corporate America or business-wise, they struggle with that. They really struggle with that. They don't know what they should lead with. What do they do best? What do they do more uniquely than anybody else? Mm-hmm. This is really interesting what you just said, because that would at least help hone that answer. And the fact that you use wise companionship, it's not, I'm passionate about XYZ. I want to empower this person, this overused language. It gave you something that somebody go, oh, I've never heard that before. And yeah, I would love to know what that long prompt was, if you're open to sharing it.
Well, I don't know if I can share it because it's part of a paid program. I don't know if the gentleman would be happy about me putting this out into the world, quote unquote.
Yeah, I hear you. Understood.
But I could give you, sort of like the basic ideas. But the interesting thing is that, if you think about, as you said, that the machine is trying to explain how it is that this lady and I interact, and is using vocabulary that we all know, but we would normally not use. The interesting thing is we were going back to what is the machine or the AI actually programmed to do, and what is its bias? And maybe it's programmed to say, don't use the things that everybody uses all the time.
Yeah.
As part of its bias. For example, I have no idea. That's just something I'm throwing out there because there were lots and lots of things in there. Some of the words all of us would have heard of and used very often. But things like wise companionship, I have never heard those two words used together. but as I said, Laura thought it was a wonderful combination. So, this idea, does it really understand? I don't know if it's understanding. I don't want to compare it to what happens. And to go back to what you were saying, Noma, what is happening in our brain, meaning in our head, versus what is happening in our gut, which is our original brain, from a long, long time ago, if you look back. I think that's the big difference. And at the moment, I think AI is doing very well getting into this head brain, but I don't know how well it's getting into our intestinal or our gut brain. And maybe that's a big distinction as well, Noma.
Anyway, this was an interesting conversation. I have at 2:00, which is in about 15 minutes, so I have to run. But thank you so much. I'm looking forward to, and I put it in my appointment book for when you return from Geneva. That's going to be fascinating. So thank you for making that change so that you can still share the information. And let me save this chat before I leave.
And don't save it yet. I'm going to put in, you can go to Geneva online. You don't have to go with me.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just go into this link that I just put in, and it says that you can just join for free, and you just click on that and you can watch everything on the center stage online.
And what's the name of this conference?
AI
Rhonda?
for Good Summit, and it's the UN. It's from the UN in Geneva, Switzerland, and that's the link where you can go and sign up.
Wow, thank you so much. I will check that out as soon as I can.
Yeah.
As I said,
everybody can go. You don't have to go in person. Everybody can go. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That makes it even more good. If that's good English. All righty.
Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your day, whatever's left. Thank you for your time today, and I'll catch up with you next month. Actually, I'll probably see you on Friday, Rhonda.
No, you won't, because I'm going to a concert on Friday, but thank you for thinking of me. Yeah.
All right. Well, you'll be there in spirit.
That's
All
right.
right then.
Exactly.
Take care.
Thank you so much,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Okay. Thank you for joining us, Noma.
You're welcome.
Okay. Hope to see you on the 16th of July, the next time.
Sure, I will come through.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you so much, Noma. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Noma.
Bye, Charles.
Bye, Noma. Nice to meet you. Sorry, I was about to say see you, but that wasn't quite accurate.
Yeah, for some reason my video is not turning on, but
no problem.
thank you for the presentation. Just getting information on the tail end of it. It's an interesting development. Thanks for sharing.
Wonderful. Say hi to everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Bye-bye.
Bye, Noma. Just while before